Next curve.
Hey, welcome everyone. This is Next Curve's reThink podcast. This episode, we're going to be breaking down the latest tech and industry events and happenings into the insights that matter. And I think that's what we always do. Anyways, I'm Leonard Lee, executive analyst at Next Curve. And in this Silicon Futures episode, which I do in collaboration with Tiria Research and Cambrian AI Research, we'll be talking about the happenings in the month of June 2025. And I'm here with my very good friend, Jim McGregor of the optically co-packaged Tiria Research. How's it going, Jim?
Good. How you doing, man?
Did I done good?
You've done good.
Did I?
You always find a unique way to introduce me.
No, I'm starting to run out of these things, though.
That may be a good thing. I don't know.
But before we get started, please remember to like, share, and react, and comment on this episode. Also, subscribe here on YouTube and Buzzsprout to listen to us on your favorite podcast platform. Opinions and statements by my guests, including Jim, are their own and not, they don't reflect mine or those of Next Curve. And we're doing this to provide an open forum for discussion and debate on all things semiconductors and chips and hyper-converged XYZ and uber scale,
neuromorphic, pie in the sky, you name it.
Oh my God. Well, we're not that. I mean, we have some
6G. No, just kidding.
No.
A little early for that one.
You're going overboard. You're going out of control. We need to apply guardrails to you. So Jim, it was weird because this month was actually quite semi-light for me. Okay, I know that no month is semi-light for you, but I'm looking forward to comparing notes and comparing what we thought were the big highlights of the month. So why don't you go ahead and start? You have something that you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, one of the events that transpired over the past month was AMD's AI event in San Jose.
Oh, wow.
It was their big opportunity, and this is kind of morphed over the years. It started out as their data center event and blah, blah, blah. So they use this mostly to introduce a couple of key things. One was their MI350, which is their latest generation accelerator, and built on the MI300 generation. And start talking about the MI400, which they'll have next year. So they're on that same annual cadence, as well as the rest of their platform that's going to be coming out. So it's kind of a deep dive into that. Obviously, more performance, more power efficiency, everything else going across the spectrum for this product. But also, it's going to be part of their system solution, which was probably the biggest announcement there, which was Helios. So much like their competition NVIDIA is doing, now they're focusing on actually developing a full rack, or in this case, it's a half rack. And they're just speccing it. So unlike NVIDIA, they don't plan on building any that are going to be branded AMD, but they plan on at least providing this rack specification to their OEM and ODM partners to be able to build that and take it to market and even modify it, for the customers that want customization. They also talked about ROCm. And I have to say that, while I still don't put it on the same level as CUDA, it's getting much, much better. Matter of fact, you can now use it on Windows. So they are making significant advancements, and they're starting to do a lot more developer outreach. They even had a developer track as part of this event in San Jose. So that was pretty significant. AMD is investing heavily. They're still going down this road. And quite honestly, with Intel kind of falling by the wayside with their roadmap, or lagging with their roadmap, they're the only other camp in town. They're the only other solution. So it is good to see that AMD is still investing heavily and still doing well. And they also took the opportunity to talk about their other products that are going to be coming out, especially next year with Epic, with the next generation Epic and everything else. But they also had a separate day for some of us to talk about their new Threadripper. Now, I love
Uh,
Threadripper. All my systems are Threadripper. I have to say that, all my demo systems. It is the ultimate workstation processor, especially we can stick either a high-end Radeon or GeForce, a GPU or GPUs, I should say, in it.
mm,
You've got just incredible power. And I really think that the workstation is going to be an incredibly valuable market going forward. We saw
yeah,
this at Computex,
yeah,
where AMD, NVIDIA, and Intel all focused on the workstation. You
yeah,
know, the fact that, it's getting expensive to use a lot of those cloud resources, and we're starting to run into resource limitations. Even OpenAI is having to
yeah.
start throttling some of their customers because they don't have enough GPUs to service everyone. I think that the workstation market is going to really be probably one of the most important spaces going forward, especially for developers, AI
Oh,
developers. Being able to do, whether you're running AI workloads in inference mode or whether you're developing new models or optimizing models or whatever, I
yeah,
think the workstation is set to kind of go through this resurgence. The same thing we
yeah,
saw when people started developing videos and images and movies and
yeah.
everything else. I think we're going to see the same thing. I think we're seeing a new wave with AI that's going to drive the workstation market forward.
Yeah, and I think it's, in regards to the AI PC narrative that's been sort of the prevailing one for the PC as it relates to AI PC, right? I think the workstation has that potential, as you're saying, to take that beachhead for enterprise, right? Because one of the things that I've been saying for the longest time, security and confidentiality are huge challenges with large models. And we have to recall the early thesis around large language models is that you're going to have this one Uber model that is going to basically be trained on all of your corporate data. That is not turning out to be the case at all. And so I totally agree with you. And we are seeing that setup where the workstation is going to find its role and will probably be that catalyst to drive enterprise AI or serve as that beachhead, right? Because right now, enterprise AI across the board is struggling. We're still talking about POCs, right? We're not talking about scale out deployments yet in the enterprise, and there's a lot of reasons for that, right? And I think you're making a really great point. And we're also seeing some of that interest or that potential being reflected back with some of our chip maker friends. And one of the things that I wanted to, you were there, I wasn't. I was at Cisco Live. But one of the things I noticed, Jim, I wanted to get your reaction to this was there was a lot of talk about actually the CPU. And to me, it seemed like the keynote presentation in particular had a leaning toward inference, right?
Mm-hmm.
That a lot of the value propositions and differentiation that AMD wanted to talk about or seemed to want to talk about was how inference is different and their portfolio was actually better tuned to address that opportunity than, let's say, their green competitor, right? And so they did, like you mentioned, they brought up Epic, but in the context of how agentic AI, when you look at the workloads of a quote unquote agentic AI application or framework or stack, a lot of that compute is not accelerated. It's the old stuff, right? It's more the traditional CPU kind of bound, workloads that aren't going to be shifting over to a GPU. Did you get that sense, or did you disagree with?
No, I would agree. And matter of fact, we've seen this messaging from Intel, NVIDIA, and AMD over the past year, where they've all
Yeah,
made the case that the CPU is very important to AI. It's important for that that pre-processing is important for running certain types of workloads.
Yeah.
It's going to be a key part of that. And the fact that if you increase the performance of the CPU in an AI platform, you're going to get more performance out of that platform. It's not just about the accelerator.
Yeah.
It's about having really a
Yeah.
CPU that can help offload and do a lot of that heavy, I would say, pre-processing and even some of that
Yeah.
those AI workloads. So no, it's not surprising. And obviously, comparing Grace to Epic is completely different. You've got a very efficient low power core in Grace that's based on the ARM architecture. You've got the x86, which is a much more complex and performance centered type of architecture. So I would agree that you're going to see, and it's going to be like everything else. Certain workloads are going to run better on this architecture. Certain workloads are going to run better on this architecture. But
Yeah.
I would definitely agree that anybody that discounts the CPU over a GPU is foolish, not just because it can process these workloads, but it can process these workloads in a lot of cases at a lot lower cost. I
Yeah.
mean, all of these
Exactly.
systems have CPUs in them. It's like you
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
use that resource because the GPUs are expensive, they're power hungry, and just like we were talking about the workstation, they require an infrastructure to support them,
Yeah.
especially when you get to these higher power levels that we're looking at with these latest GPUs that are running,
Yeah. Yeah.
600 watts and up. So it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
And the CPU becomes a critical part of it. Matter of fact, even like if you want to go a step further, start talking about what IBM's doing. They're
Yeah.
integrating AI accelerators into their data center processors,
Yeah.
both with Tulum and Power. So you've got that capability in the processor to run certain types of AI workloads, as well as their Spire accelerator outside the
Yeah.
processor.
Yeah, and one of the things that I thought was really interesting was their announcement for supporting distributed inference, which I thought was really interesting. And I had to take a double take on that because it's basically what we're seeing with NVIDIA's Dynamo, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's a big deal. That also places AMD in in a flexible situation, sort of how Dynamo is theoretically and probably practically positioning NVIDIA to further build on its repurposing talk track, right? So for all these really large Uber AI supercomputing deployments that a lot of their customers are doing. So I thought that was number one surprising, but they're very fast following NVIDIA in some really important areas. So,
Mm-hmm.
and you know what? Credit to Intel. A lot of the points that you're making earlier, they were talking about it for a couple of years, and you and I, as well as your colleagues at Tiria, as well as Carl, we have been talking about this for a long time. This is not new stuff for us. It's just we're observing the eventuality that we had kind of been advising the industry actually for since the advent of this Chat GPT. So it is interesting to see AMD now position itself in sort of this continuum, this constant continuum of generative AI evolution, right, into this agentic world.
Yeah,
This
and quite
agentic
honestly,
phase.
Jensen said it best that the new unit of compute is the data center, because you have to have, and whether that's a single data center, multiple data centers, whatever, you have to think of these solutions as a single entity, a single system, a single server, a
Yeah.
single rack, single everything, all working together to be effective. And just to give some of our viewers a feeling of what that really means. It was funny because Tiria Research did our first AI forecast in 2023, and we projected like a 19x, 19 times increase in demand by the end of 2024. We were wrong, and we were one of the most aggressive forecasts out there. It was more like 500 and some odd percent. It was ridiculous. But things are changing so rapidly. We were new with LLMs at that time. We didn't have agentic AI, and just to give you a feeling, agentic AI, you're talking about, having agents that can reason. So they're using multiple models and maybe going through the models multiple times and even calling other agents.
Right.
So you're building out an AI ecosystem with agentic AI where we're probably going to have more users when you consider all the agents than we have people on the planet.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's a huge thing. That changes, what the demand is, not to mention the fact that they're generating more and more tokens or images
Mm.
or videos every time they run through something.
Yeah.
We're still working on our new forecast. We've done the token part of it. We're still working on the images and forecast, but we're talking going from like 667 trillion tokens generated in 2024
Mm.
to almost 80 quadrillion tokens by 2030. I mean, we're talking about a compounded annual growth rate of 127% on average, which basically means we're more than doubling the number of tokens every single year.
Mm.
It's insane. So, and it's funny because I hear people talk about, well, are we going to kind of reach an ebbing of AI and it's going to drop off? It's like, if we're going to reach it, I have no idea when because we are running so fast, so hard. And all these guys, Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, I give them credit. They're looking at this and saying, listen, we can't afford 10 to 20% increases in performance. We need to think of everything holistically because we have to deliver 100 or 1,000 times more performance, not only to meet the demand, but to bring the cost down of AI. And that's a huge challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is such a complicated matter because there's so many factors in scaling and tweaking and progressing the economics of all of this. It's pretty mind boggling, and we'll touch on a couple of things that I've managed to encounter at Sensors Converge in that regard. So yeah, so let's move on. One of the events that I
Tell
attended,
me about Sensors Converge. I want to know all about this. Come on.
Sensors Converge. It was all about edge AI. So you can't escape any of this AI stuff. It's infectious. It's infecting. It's like a bacteria. Anyway, yeah, you know what? It's all about scale down, right? A lot of what we've been enamored with in the AI world has been scale up and scale out, but this is what you see in the sensor world is more about scaling things down. And so there's been a lot of progress, especially this year, with algorithms making their way toward, microcontrollers. I mean, we're talking about models that are, compressed down to a few kilobytes. I mean, just really, really small, highly functional, but application specific models that are progressing this notion of smart sensors, right? And a lot of the focus seems to be on machine vision, call it machine vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you look at the sensor world, in terms of data volumes, right, and data processing requirements, is still video, right? LiDAR seemed to take a bit of a backseat this year. Last year, it was also pretty tepid, but it seems to have hit a bottom, maybe. I'm not quite sure, but you don't
It's still
see
expensive. It's still expensive.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think the industry is leaning toward machine vision, just simply because cameras are readily available and the edge AI capabilities are becoming much more capable. And, a lot of mention about the silicon becoming much cheaper as well, right? And that's always really an important factor when it comes to embedded and edge AI. Also,
Well, and there's another reason for that. That's also because there's a lot of things you can do with other radio waves, whether it's radar, whether it's Wi-Fi, whether it's, whatever. There's a lot of things you can do to do like UWB, to do very accurate positioning, to do sensing. So there are alternatives to LiDAR. So I think that's a reason, and it varies by segment. Some segments are going to use this, some segments are going to use that. But I think that's another reason is because we're still really learning that there's so much we can do with, and let's face it, they're all waves, whether radio waves or light waves. But there's a lot we can do in the radio frequency realm that we haven't tapped yet.
Yeah, and you're making a great point here because there's increasing talk about more capable sensor fusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I coined this thing, and by the way, large language models and even SLMs have not really made their way down too close to the sensor. Those are still pretty experimental, nascent type concepts, but a little bit further away from the sensor, there is some, let's say, emerging conversations around what I call long thinking sensor data fusion, right? Where you might have an SLM that collects, basically interprets aggregated data off of an array of sensors, and then applies a certain degree of probably pretty low level contextualization of that data. And so I think next year you're going to see more talk about that because in terms of the technologies and some of the economics, it's there. And we're seeing some of these types of patterns play out in the automobile, right? Although, mostly in the infotainment system, but there is this thinking that, hey, we can introduce some of this longer reasoning type functionality within some of these operational systems, or even mission critical systems, right? But it's a layer of reasoning. It's not going to replace a lot of the real time critical functions that sensors and perception systems today play. So that's one of the interesting things. Hey, here's the other thing. A lot of talk of IMU or inertial measurement units, and I think people are searching for the next big thing beyond the smartphone, right? You can tell because there's a lot. When you go to the booths, you do hear a lot of the vendors talk about how they were approached by XYZ company about how they can use their technology for smart, intelligent or contextual computing type applications. So, our buddies at Intonero were there, right? So Edge AI Foundation had their pavilion, and one of the things they were showcasing with their T1 spiking neural processor was a new demo. I don't know if you've seen this one, Jim, but it's like a gesture control application on a smartwatch. So, a lot of those types of demos at the show this year. And then the other thing that I thought was really cool, and I just bumped into these guys. I didn't even know that they were there. It's a company called Omitron. Are you familiar with them?
No, I'm not.
Los Angeles. Okay. So what they do is they focus on MEMS mirrors, right, for optical switching. So you might want to take this one.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Are you familiar with them?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So okay. So, what was his name? The CTO, Trent Huang, I think. Yeah, because he has the same last name as Jensen Huang. Yeah, he was talking about their, the optical MEMS solution that they have, and their technology being used in like some of these more advanced LiDAR applications. Mm-hmm. Importantly, these guys I think are former Google networking guys. They're really honing in on the AI data center opportunity and looking at the optical circuit switching and bringing about the next generation of optical switches for AI supercomputing. So I thought, that was weird, but right now the bottleneck is apparently, according to Trent Huang and Jensen Huang, get that. Okay. It's this OCS stuff, right? Which they're looking to solve with their MEMS mirror technology. So it was a great event. I think next year is going to be even bigger. And full disclosure, I'm an advisory board member for Sensors Converge. So everyone come next year. It's gonna be awesome.
I used to speak at Sensors World, but I haven't been invited to speak at Sensors Converge. So that's an opportunity.
We'll have to change that.
Okay.
Yeah,
would love to. Well, and I think it really fits in with some of the same stuff we're seeing at Embedded World.
Yeah,
great event. I'm expecting to see very similar stuff at IFA later this year in Germany. So it is, I agree with you. The edge is lighting up significantly with opportunities, with innovation and everything else. Not just how to use AI, but how to use these advanced sensor technologies, advanced semiconductor technologies. It's going to be very interesting over the next, let's face it, by 2030, everything's going to have some form of AI in it. Might be something as simple as doing battery management or maintenance detection or whatever. But everything's going to be everything's going to have AI, and everything's going to be processing AI. So the challenge, I think, is designing for AI first, and then figuring out how everything else fits around it.
Yeah, that's a good thought.
I mean, I feel like so far we've tried to bolt stuff on, but I think companies are finally getting that you have to design for AI first, and then figure out how other things fit in there, because AI is going to take over a lot of the stuff you did previously, and do it much more efficiently.
Okay, well, we'll have to have a further discussion on that for some drinks at some point. No, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think there's nuances to that because, innovation is complicated, right?
Yes.
We'll have to record that session. Hopefully we will have some nice drinks that we are imbibing or have imbibed several of before we get.
Actually, innovation is very simple. You just have to follow the 2 rules of engineering. First rule is make it simple. Second rule is ignore the first rule.
I was about to say. Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Okay. Hey. So I was at Cisco Live 2025. That was my first time really there live, which was really cool. And I thought you might find this really interesting. So, Cisco's there with AI supercomputing, right? I mean, they announced the partnership that they have with NVIDIA with ConnectX, right? So they're using that as well as creating, networking fabrics for all variations of AI supercomputing, right? Doing a lot of work, especially with the hyperscalers, as well as the new neo clouds, right? So that was one of the things that they really wanted to emphasize. And it is a growing reality, right? Because they're involved with Humane, G42, all these Middle East, Eastern AI, Uber, mega AI initiatives that were announced. Was it last month or the month?
It was just last month.
Like so much stuff happening in such short time.
Yeah, that was right before Computex.
When was Computex?
That was the end of May.
It's just see, it's getting crazy. But hey, I did bump into Martin Lund. Do you know him? He's the VP of hardware at Cisco, and it was really cool because I met him at a mixer, right, a social with the executives, and we were just chatting. I initiated the chat bot because what he did was he showed me this G200 NPU, which is not a neural processing unit, it's a network processing unit, right? And the friggin' thing is like the size of a Blackwell.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's massive, right? And so I said, "Oh, so did you use CoWoS-L for that?" And after that, we were like best buddies. He goes, "You know what CoWoS-L is?" He's going, "Yeah, I do." It's like, "Oh, that's awesome. That means we can talk with XYZ." And next thing you know, he opened his kimono. And we had a great time talking about the future of AI supercomputing and the important role of networking, right? And so we have to remember the networking part or the scale out element has been something that wasn't necessarily top of mind or prominent in this whole AI supercomputing narrative. It's been I would say about a year old, right? Once NVIDIA started to introduce the concept of the Blackwell systems.
Well, it's not just networking. I mean, now cooling. I mean, the three infrastructure things for the data center that people forget about that are probably the most important parts of the data center connecting all these servers and compute units is the networking, the power, and the cooling. I mean, power is going through a huge change. I mean, we've already upgraded a lot of the hyperscale data centers from 48 volt DC to 400 volt DC, throughout the data center. But now, especially with Blackwell and the NVL, the GB200 NVL 72, that's 1.2 up to 1.2 megawatts per rack. So now they're having to upgrade to 800 volts DC throughout the data center to support these new racks and new systems and solutions. But and we also found out, even though they said that those systems could be air cooled, it didn't work too well. So basically, we're having to go to liquid cooling on all these solutions. So it is really a significant change for the infrastructure, and the infrastructure has become so critical. Matter of fact, one of the biggest problems right now is the fact that you can build out, you can get these racks in, possibly as quick as 6 months after you order them. However, it still takes you 2 to 3 years to build a data center if you're lucky. And a lot of that has to do not just with the physical building, but those three components, because a lot of times they get customized. So companies have to start thinking about not customizing those and going to more modular solutions from the likes of Flex and Vertiv and Schneider and Delta and blah, blah, blah. Because the only way you're going to actually get a data center up and running in 12 months is to start thinking about everything holistically, including those three factors.
So I had a really interesting conversation with Denise Lee, who is the VP of Data Center at Cisco, and so they're actually working on a lot of really interesting power solutions, including like this insane PoE technology that I would see that they're starting to bring out of R&D. But one of the things she mentioned was how there is growing interest in immersion, and I know how much you hate immersion, but we did see some of this stuff at Computex, right? And hear me out.
No. I think we're going to see a lot of different. I think immersion is going to be a lot of different things. I don't think it's going to be just dropping a rack in liquid. I think we're going to see a lot of where we're just using immersion on part of the board or the module. We're going to be using immersion on maybe the board or certain parts of the system. And there's all the way up to, what Microsoft did, sinking a freaking data center in the middle of the ocean. We're going to see a lot of different versions of immersion. So I think that we're going to have to break out this category pretty soon.
Yeah. And, it'll be interesting to hear what folks have to say at Hot Chips this year. But here's the thing. She made an interesting point. The value proposition of going immersion is that you can deploy that kind of cooling architecture in a conventional or traditional data center. You don't have to do that heavy refitting or re-architecting that's associated with water cooled, right? Or liquid cool. And so that was a cool takeaway from Cisco Live. And so with that,
it's not that easy. There's some components that don't. You're using a liquid dielectric material, and there's no single one. Everyone's experimenting. You can even use a gel. We did that in some of the military applications we did with Motorola. But you never know how it's going to interact with other components, other materials, other things. So, When people say, "Oh, it's easy," it's not easy.
No, I don't. No, no, no. I think you've made the point that it's difficult, and I think the industry recognizes that. I'm just pointing out a value proposition that's often talked about, right? And then there is an associated cost with refitting older data centers, and this is one of the reasons why I think across the board we're seeing more air cooled offerings, right? Whether it's from AMD, NVIDIA, or even Cisco, there's this recognition that some of these older data centers are not going away, right? But they need to be on the modernization path for quote unquote accelerated computing, and so they're not being ignorant of the fact that there is a brownfield reality that this this revolution is going to have to deal with, right? Like every other revolution. So anyway, hey, before we hit the record button, there were a couple of things you wanted to talk about. I know one was related to the end of lifing of a lot of stuff lately.
Yeah, we seem to be seeing a lot of companies starting to say that, we don't want to keep supporting some of these products. Nest did this with their first 2 generations of products. Yes, their thermostats will still work, but they won't have the learning and some of the smart features associated with them. I guess Apple is calling the is it the iPhone 6 is now, I don't know what the term they used with agent, but whatever. They're not going to be supporting. And there's been a couple of other announcements I think we've seen recently where, we
iPhone 6.
I can't remember what generation it was, quite honestly, but it was one of the generations that they said, but we're seeing that. I think, I think, maybe it's just summer cleaning.
Oh, no,
companies are looking up and saying, okay, we need to stop supporting some of these older products.
Well, no, for the big news was their end of lifing their support for any Mac running on Intel.
Oh, that was one of them. Yeah, that was one of the.
Yeah, that was the
big announcement. One, right? Yeah. So no, I think we're seeing a lot of that spring or summer cleaning, what you might see, but I also think we're seeing a lot of cleaning house kind of across companies, not just in terms of their products, but also in terms of how they're organized, how they're structured. Obviously, the biggest one right now is Intel. Yeah, they have announced that they're going to be doing, or at least I've seen that they've announced, or there's been reports that they're going to be laying off 10,000 more people. I know that they are going to be getting out of certain markets, and we saw this before when they were in trouble and they were falling behind with AMD and Paul Otellini took over. He got them out of communications and a lot of other segments. Well, so far, one of the ones that's hit the floor is automotive. We don't know what else yet, but it will be interesting to see. And we continue to see, it's interesting. I actually sat on a plane, one of my trips, next to a lady that used to work for, I think it was Oscom or something like that, but a company that does educational software. And she said basically AI eliminated their product lines, or some of their product lines because, didn't need anymore. So she became a teacher. I guess, in the past year. And she says she uses ChatGPT every day. She just gives it kind of a brief outline and it creates a lesson plan for her in seconds. So I think that it's interesting because, even, I don't know about you, but even me, I'm finding new ways, I think, almost every week to use some of these tools. And in a lot of cases, I'm finding out that I want more. They're not doing enough. Really? It's not good enough yet. So it's interesting. I'm fine. I think that we're getting a lot of people every day, every week, every month over that initial hump of what AI is and how to use AI, especially for generative and agentic AI. And it's going to be a fun time. But it's also transforming the enterprise.
Well, I'm sort of on the cautious side of the coin on this, just because I see what kind of risks it poses, especially from the standpoint of trust, cybersecurity, and just the quality of information and content that we have out on the web. I see a lot of trash, quite honestly, being produced. And if you go onto YouTube these days, or even Facebook, you see a lot of junk. And so I think, the challenge is going to be how to manage some of that, to avoid some of the detrimental impacts that all of that is inevitably going to have, but ensuring that folks like you and other folks who are domain experts can leverage technology in a way where it can have benefit, right? And it can yield productivity and value creation. I don't think that's necessarily you realize that through a lack of discipline. There's best practices. There's a lot of things in terms of disciplines and guardrails that we as users also need to apply. And I don't see that happening as much as it should. Although, that being said, like what we see at what some of the vendors doing, and I would include Cisco in this, as well as Apple, they're in a material way looking at some of these gaps and problems. Like, for instance, Cisco has Hypershield as well as their AI defense. They're looking at, ensuring trustability from the model all the way to, end-to-end transactions. Now, this stuff is still early, right? But the recognition of how big the problem is, and we're also seeing it with other cybersecurity companies that are more real about generative AI, that are being much more cautious, right? Especially with agentic, they're freaked out, and so I have that as part of my lens, and so I get what you're saying, Jim, but there's also tremendous misuse that is also happening. It's not even will it happen? It is happening, and that's creating a tremendous concern, especially around cyber trust and cybersecurity. But that's where I'm coming from with this stuff, right? And that's that counterbalance that you and I and that debate.
You're just a downer. I'm an upper.
I know you. I know it's great. It's great. I think otherwise, again, our show would be really friggin' boring if we agreed on everything. And the reason why I love you guys so much is because we disagree on things.
But I'm right. No, just kidding.
You are in your own little way. You are right.
In my own mind, is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yes. I'm just trying to be nice, right? I'm a cordial guy. But
we've talked about a lot of things here.
Yeah. Okay, so let's also talk about this other big piece of news, because Qualcomm acquired. Announced that they're acquiring Alphawave Semi, and I know that you have talked about Alphawave Semi forever and ever. Well, yeah, they. I think this is a big deal for Qualcomm. I mean, it's a beginning on what looks like is going to be a pretty long journey in what is becoming an increasingly crowded market. But I mean, what's your take?
They're not saying much about it at this point in time, and I understand the reason for being conservative, but I mean, obviously, this is an IP play. They want to be able to pull in Alphawave's technology and be able to utilize that. And that's not the first one. I mean, they've been acquiring several companies that are going to enhance their capabilities throughout AI segments going forward. So they are. They are definitely getting more aggressive. I mean, I would say that thing about Cristiano Amon at Qualcomm. He is, looking at Qualcomm as being a much broader company, targeting not just obviously mobile and automotive, but a host of different IoT segments. Now the data center as well, getting aggressive on the data center, where they kind of pre-announced a new CPU for the data center.
Yeah.
Definitely transitioning the company from its traditional markets into kind of a new growth phase.
Yeah.
opportunity to grow in a lot of segments, some that are going to be slow growth. It's kind of hard. A lot of the IoT markets don't
Yeah.
grow very quickly, and they're very fragmented. But positioning Qualcomm as once again being that engineering leader to help advance some of these technologies in some of these markets, and quite honestly, a lot of them, especially AI. When you look at it, connectivity is so critical to it.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, they already have that foot in the door for so many different types of applications through their connectivity offerings.
Well, yeah, but not only that, they're not really a newbie to this space because, last year, I think it was last year, Cerebras announced that they selected Qualcomm's A100, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, for inference, right?
Um, Cloud AI 100, yeah.
Yeah, AI 100 for inference. So, and then, I know that it's not hyperscale stuff, but they also announced that AI appliance for edge infrastructure, and
Hmm.
so that's far from being all this scale out, scale up AI supercomputing. But they are there, and like you said, they're they're probably going to be coming to market. We'll find out at Snapdragon Summit, hopefully.
Hmm.
uh, for data center, which is something that actually Nuvia, before Qualcomm acquired them, Nuvia that was Nuvia's game, right, at the time.
Yeah,
So
that, and they've been
they have
pretty
DNA.
consistent. I
Yeah,
mean, if you think about it, they going all the way back to Atheros, CSR, Cellwise, Arriver, Nuvia, Edge Impulse, Alphawave.
yeah,
They the good thing is they're making very strategic acquisitions for the markets that they want to serve.
yeah. And then they penned that MOU with Humane,
Yes.
right?
Well, them and everyone else under the sun.
Under the sun. I know. I know. But theirs was particularly interesting, though. Some of them were
Yeah.
concurrent, but this one seemed more like a co-development, right?
Yes.
Development play.
Yeah.
So this is where that IP, I think, can come into, uh,
Hmm.
come into the equation and be something valuable for Tarek and his team as they look to build what might be a bespoke or humane specific infrastructure. So
Hmm.
we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting because the Alphawave portfolio, like you mentioned, networking brings the networking aspect to
Yes.
data center portfolio. Also, some interesting things in terms of chiplet IP, right?
Yeah, and we've seen this with every company that's wanted to get in the data center. Obviously, with
Yeah,
NVIDIA, with Intel, with
Marvell.
AMD, Marvell. Companies acquiring other
Yeah,
pieces because you can't just be a single solution provider or single silicon provider
no,
for
not
the data center. If you're going to be a player there, and we have to remember, data centers are more than just AI. They are communications. They are embedded data centers for military and government. There's a lot of different types of data centers. There's enterprise data centers, but you can't be a single silicon provider. You have to provide a platform. And that's where I see Alphawave fitting in as part of
yeah.
that platform for connectivity.
Yeah, and you know what? I think one of the things that really plays in Qualcomm's favor is that in terms of their silicon, especially for the CPU core, CPU, right?
Hmm.
They have they have. My feeling is this: they have a very, very clean, technological platform, right? That can scale down as well as scale up, and it'll be interesting to see how Gerard and team leverage that for the AI supercomputing opportunity that they have in front of themselves. So, anyway, I don't know if you disagree or agree.
No, I agree. And Qualcomm's always had some of the best engineering talent. Sorry about that. They pride themselves on being able to solve very difficult problems. And
Yeah.
we wouldn't be nearly where we are with wireless technology or anything else without Qualcomm today.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing, what they can do in a lot of these segments. I would expect, we're going to see a lot of innovation, and the data center especially is ripe for innovation at this point in time.
Yeah.
Pat Gelsinger talked
And
about this in
competition.
yeah, well, yeah. Pat talked about at Intel Direct Connect about having to put everything closer together, or what I call the densification of compute,
Yeah.
to increase performance and efficiency. That means the CPUs, the accelerators, the networking, the memory, everything closer together. And last year I was talking to people, and they were talking, yeah, it's going to be 3 to 5 kilowatts. I'm talking to people this year, and they're saying, Jim, that's going to be 20 to 30 kilowatts per module. I mean, this is insane. And quite honestly, one of the areas that I think is going
That
to
is
get
pretty
a lot of
crazy.
innovation is going to be the server design.
Yeah.
I think the pizza boxes or trays are going to outlive their usefulness, because I think when we start thinking about thermals in terms of cooling and power and everything else, we need to re-architect the rack. And I think going to bricks or blades are going to be much more efficient. And yeah, I'm talking about my history at Motorola with
I
VME,
know.
compact
You're
PCI,
not
and
gonna let
advanced
this
CCA.
go.
I'm not going to let it go. I think we've done everything on the silicon level and the data center level, and the rack's got to change. The server's got
Uh,
to change.
yeah. Um, yeah. I
Trust me, I'm going to be right.
yeah. No, I'm trying to figure out ways to disagree with you, and it's really yeah, especially given how annoying it is that you keep bringing this thing up.
It's going to happen.
Yeah. As Forrest Gump once said, that's all I got to say about that. So,
In 10 years, the rack looks completely different. In 10 years, we're not carrying around a rectangular device. In 10
and
years,
computing,
everything changes.
yeah, well, things do change, right? And they are changing really quickly.
Well, and just what we're seeing in robotics, we're seeing, I think, we robotics is nothing new. We've had it for a long time, and over the past couple of years, we've really improved the sensor capability and the motor
Yeah.
function and everything else. But adding agentic AI to it is kind of that final step that really enables that physical AI, or those autonomous machines, the robots, to be able to do stuff that we've always dreamed they could do, but never really could get them to that point. So I think that robotics, I think 2025 is a turning year for robotics with agentic AI. And
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing what we see over the next couple of years. Just having a
Oh,
robot walk up to me at CES, introduce itself, and shake my hand, I was blown away.
oh, no pun intended, right? No, I agree with you simply because, if I were to make a pun, I think the defense industry, which is heating up big time,
Hmm.
is going to drive a lot of that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't think that industrial is going to drive a lot of that as much as we think. So anyway, and we do see that momentum, whether it's for the newest generation fighters and this whole idea of using, let's say, NAGD, which is the next generation advanced something. I don't know what the D stands for,
I
but
can't remember either.
yeah. And then drone orchestration, uh,
Yep.
and then and in order for that to happen, you have to recognize that these drones are going to be largely autonomous.
We should do another podcast just on the cool stuff in defense. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and I've been
Scary?
a
Yes.
lot of that stuff.
Awesome. Totally.
Well, yeah, it's scary, but then this is like this is where a lot of the interest is going into, and I think a lot of the leading edge in terms of applications, because we're seeing it in Ukraine, right?
Hmm.
Who would ever thought it wasn't drone delivery that made drones a big thing? It was what they're doing on the battlefield right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so and you know how we try to keep it real, right? I mean, geez, these are the realities, and so we just have to track the market in the way, and the industry in the way that it's actually expressing itself, not in the way that people might be led to believe. But it's exciting times. AI is just going nuts, and it was a really the crazy thing is this was supposed to be a silicon or semiconductor light month, and this is probably our longest podcast. But hopefully everyone enjoyed the banter. Jim, thank you so much. Hey, everyone, make sure to connect with Tiria Research, okay, at www.tiriasresearch.com. Jim and team, they're fantastic. They are, dare I say, legendary in the industry. And I know a lot of folks are very happy that we're doing this collaboration along with Carl Freund of Cambrian AI Research. And, they have their own, I think you guys have your own podcast, right?
We do stuff with E-Times. We do stuff on our own YouTube channel. We do stuff with all kinds of people. So happy to work with the industry.
All kinds of people like me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, hey, remember to subscribe to our podcast here, Silicon Futures, again, in collaborations with Tiria Research and Cambrian AI Research, which will be featured on the Next Curve YouTube channel. And check out the audio version on Buzzsprout, or find us on your favorite podcast platform. Also, subscribe to the Next Curve Research portal at www.next-curve.com for the tech and industry insights that matter. And we'll see you next month.
Next month.
Futures. All right.
We'll do it again.
Yeah.
Cheers, mate.
Bye.